While Geshe is coming, I may also say, for Khyentse Rinpoche's visit, we have a lot of opportunity to practice generosity and to support the center. Quite a bit of additional expense to be able to invite this amazing teacher here. During the days of miracles, the good karma of actions like supporting the center are multiplied enormously. So now is a really fine time to practice generosity if you can. That'd be amazing, both for us and for you. Thank you.
So that we don't have to do musical chairs, can everybody see Geshe all right? And can you hear and see both of us all right?
Geshe, can you say something so you can check?
Oh, good morning.
Yeah.
Okay, yep. Great. All right. Oh, I see that you're not going to be able to see my face, so assuming you want to, I'll just lower it a little bit. That's what it is. That looks a bit better. All right.
Hello, the sound I don't think is working.
Are you serious?
Yeah, you were much louder when you're near the laptop.
Well, I'm using these, so I don't know how that's possible. And they're fully charged. Do you want me to just use RT?
Well, we do hear you. It's just I don't think that system's working.
Okay. So what's our plan of action then? Just use the Yeti.
Patience?
Oh.
Yeah.
No, but if you
maybe.
I think we should change to the other mic system.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Gotcha.
Microphone, yeah, what do I do?
It's not those microphones.
It is. Look, it is these microphones. We see fully charged, going, plugged in the back. Let me just check our settings. Hold on, Dave. Sorry. Is that better? Is that better, Dave? Now I can't hear Dave.
Yeah, you sound better now.
Is it better? Okay. All right. Okay. I think just it was not, I just switched the port that it was plugged into. So that we know that for next time. And thank you for your patience, everybody. And thanks to Dave for letting me know. Please do let us know, because, if you have to listen for an hour and a half with not great sound, that's kind of annoying. And I see we are streaming as well. All right.
Say, Kedra, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Did you click on the original sound for musicians on?
I don't have the option to change that. Oh, I tried. So what I noticed is that when I switched the port, it turned it off. Let me see
Honey.
if I have any freedom. It says original sound for musicians is on, noise suppression is
On.
disabled. Yeah.
Good, perfect.
Okay.
There we go, everybody. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. It's kind of like when you're in an airplane and you're like waiting to take off. All the things get checked, but I think we are good to go. Losugi.
디자레
Dizare.
다 강가 다시 델레 강가 데고 기고야 보여요.
So first of all, Tashi Dele, greetings to all. We hope that you are all well and we hope that you are all happy.
다더니 다 가로수 강가 다 디디세텔 소소소 다 물리자 채워대. 소야 소소라 벌어요. 이사 다 대프게 수쇼소야도 다 니가게 대시서 많이 봐. 다되게 대시 간스드 그 당가서
So in terms of our discussion, it is very much related to this human rebirth we have in our hands right now. How can we best make the use of this opportunity? How can we shift our endeavors, our cultivation, so that we are not aiming at just the temporary happiness of this life, but so that we are also accomplishing the causes of ultimate happiness?
어다 물린델었더니 예지저 노블리 졸하베 말리 사티 된다 때즈 버게 소아 요바스슈나 어느 관계 버게 내가 여보체 토야 가디나 이더니 가보존 데토야 예지 지와르 세기와레스.
So if we are able to really take the essence of the words, this human rebirth, which is more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel, gonda yishin ginorbu le la kelena.
졸하베 그랬더니 아까 자tom 버털리 졸하베 코르잘라지 임바 하거나 하고서 니가래 이나요 소아 여보지도 텔라테네테네 다 디세 졸라만도 내가 여보 제가 고가지 와레스.
So if we are really able to take the import of these words of this human rebirth more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel, not only are we able to seize the moment with happiness, experience a generally happier mindset, but we are also able to avoid wasting time so that we can pursue our spiritual goals.
어떤 에스 던디지와 이자 가첨보 전에 로르 관계가 돌아 단조 니즈와 대체와 니가와 사네서 가첨보 서지 용기와래 할레비 가첨보 이사레스.
So that is the reason that whenever you look at any Lam Rim, at any stages of the path texts, it has these 3 points about recognizing a precious human rebirth, understanding its great meaning, and comprehending its rarity, understanding that it is something difficult to find.
노버 젠다는 짬먹어 노버기네 요바게 소아지 하는 드림 웃기 보지 알아.
And so if you know that you have this jewel that is superior to all others in your hand right now, then you don't need to so much worry about seeking other jewels. There's just a bit of background, and I noticed 2 people are unmuted, so if you could just mute yourself, and then of course when you have questions, feel free to unmute yourself.
리소이 어다 단종이죠 대체와 니가와 사트 프레 소와 때에서 프레 슈아이나 다 레로 몽보 지티거든이 봐 과토야 그거.
Another benefit to understanding and recollecting these 3 points of the precious human rebirth, recognizing it, understanding its great meaning, and comprehending its rarity, if we are able to develop this in the mind, it is also a natural antidote to all different types of laziness.
든지레서 다 간조 든지네 다 레가 제야데 어느 간조 대시 돼야 될다 셔도 노니기게 돈이 다 대시 내가 자지 전에 잘라지요 알아왔어.
And also when we understand the situation that we are in and we engage in the work, in the activities accordingly, we understand that in terms of the happiness that we are seeking, there are kind of 2 factors, right? The outer causes as well as the inner causes, or we could say outer happiness and inner happiness.
다 대노지 되니까 강에 되게텔라요. 셔도 노니까네 강에 되게네지요.
And similarly, in terms of what causes us problems, in terms of what causes us difficulties, there are external factors that cause those difficulties, and there are also internal factors that cause those difficulties.
이나야 간조 야 강에 지체비깔 강에 되게 지체조데 실로 조준 저거 주고요 아이자. 아니 간조데 깔 강에 되게 가르쳐 강에 되게 체르노도 아니 노아 디자 체르노요 알았어요.
Our problem is that we actually think that the outer conditions that are causing the difficulties, for example, are the main ones, and we don't pay attention to the inner conditions of that difficulty or unhappiness. So by directing all of our attention to those outer seeming causes of unhappiness, not only are we not able to defeat all of those causes, but because of the energy we put into it, we can actually increase the strength of that unpleasant appearance that is bothering us.
딱 야 강에도 거의 요다 가르 제바이나요. 소소가 소노토토 노아 드니스드니 슈알라 테네 데스 슈송 선베가 저하지 레바이나. 다 데트 팔레비트니 갈레 타 여보질 로야기네스 슈알세.
So what do we do then? Well, if we can understand that appearance of the outer difficulty, right, of that external thing that is causing us difficulty, is based, at least in part, has at least something to do with our own mistaken thinking, with our own mistaken perception of it. This can really, really be something that greatly helps us.
다 니까를 기워. 아니 텔라테네 요아리요아 로고요나 소소게 소안스프게 노아가리마다 하코네라 데뉴르 두게 다에 갈레 테네 요아른 로고요사레스.
So if we want to achieve happiness and also work from happiness from birth to birth in the future, then what we have to understand is how our own misapprehension of things, how our own false perception of things leads to a lot of difficulties, and in that way we will gradually be able to diminish our difficulties.
다 든디지 자더니 디아 데두 가리나요. 다 초와중에 간디지나요. 아니 지체가 쪼데 실로는 뭔데 소소게 세게 놀르듯.
So the thing here to understand is that whether we talk about happiness or suffering, whether we talk about pleasant feelings or unpleasant feelings, the main cause of those experiences is not the external cause. The main causes of those experiences are the internal causes that are within us.
다 네스 든디지 자 실로를 당이네 때네만도 당이네 다 놀는데 마도 실로만데.
And if we take this to the next level, we understand that ultimately there is no external enemy that we can point to, no person that is the cause of all of those problems, right? The real enemy, the one that we need to deal with, is the one within, that internal enemy.
다 당이네 놀고 다 녀모 봐도 되니 시지도와 사 당이네 데스. 녀도도 시도 녀모 봐도 시도.
So what is that inner enemy? It is the inner enemy of the afflictions, or we could say the two obscurations, the afflictive obscurations and the knowledge obscurations.
다 이나요 시부터 뭐 가시게 나기 워치는 녀무 녀추와 자 녀무들에 되는 이나요 녀무 니빠 추시는 니빠 요 말에 라마 가시게 되는 수요하레스.
Dito lang hamokos.
시시오스 당기는 놀러 누야스 알린 깨전에 뭐 아주 자와 이나요 아마 가시게 나기 워치는 녀무 녀추와레 니빠 요 말에
So we've said that ultimately the enemy is something that is within us and that it is the afflictions, right? It is tied to the afflictions that are the difficulty. But many great masters have said that in terms of this inner enemy of the afflictions, it is not something that is terribly powerful. It is something that is humble.
저는 야 내가 컨트롤 가자 쳐도 가래 이나요 당인에 데레테네 이나요 코러스 녀충하레스. 제세 가르에서는 나로서 야보전에 진도와 얘는 코러스를 냄비 차주에서 요매아이자 아니 곧 내봐요 말해
덴베텐 용마
냄비차 자샤 지주면
So then when we speak about these afflictions such as attachment, anger, and jealousy, then certainly they are things that cause us a lot of difficulties, that cause us a lot of problems. But when we say that they are not terribly powerful or that they are humble, what does that actually mean? Why did the great teachers say that? It is because if we do well, if we engage in the practice, those afflictions can definitely be diminished because they do not have even 1% out of 100 of a basis in truth. They have no grounding or basis in truth whatsoever.
야 사모투만이 가성가 마셔봐 노지. 사모투만이 알레트 코로 과하게 땜범 마찬 태조사 왔던지 건데 대범에 왔어요.
And this also connects with a statement that Geshe shared last time about profound emptiness, that if the practitioner thinks, just even has a doubt, like, is emptiness like this or is emptiness like that, it can shake the very foundations of samsara.
숑바도 제바도 대질을 나로서 알레포게 땜범 마셔와 이나 그들 가보 잡았던지 건도 때에서 뭐 되게 소용 그 알았어.
Lagi?
shomba도 zeba도 niji la konzo ngazo tes gawo chaba yinayo
Oh, gabo chawa yun sana?
gawo gawo hako mande
Je.
gawa tes gawo shwa yinayo
Uh-huh.
ani control to cross madewa zo yungu yares
And similarly, when we look at the other antidotes to the afflictions, such as love, compassion, patience, and so forth, it is said that if the practitioner develops just a little bit of a liking for patience, for example, it will shake the very foundations of anger and so forth.
당ye 내서 던지지 요 mali yo po de mai leva yo po tel soso se te pge shombado niji 다 던지게 세 yo po ji de chido go man jiban no jiso mazo se ate soso lapal rongo yo ba si wonda wo chire duas.
So then if we want to use this human rebirth and make the most of its opportunity, then it is perfectly clear that what we have to do is take these beneficial minds, such as love, compassion, and so forth, and mix them with our mental continuum as much as possible, like milk and water.
다 던지 이자 비테지 갈래. 다 던지 소소 갈래 가게 되는 라이로. 다 던지 이자 가위 ngo네 mali yo pon디 til 다 던지 지는 간도 레카신도.
So then with joy, understanding the opportunity that this precious human rebirth affords us, let us proceed in the practice happily. So let us just take a moment to calm our body and mind as a preliminary step. Just have this awareness that with this focus, what we try to do is bring these four elements within the body into a good balance.
Yungwa shikaze chanyomba lele choba yina, ane tela tembitene selele. Selele yina tene gaye sedu kiwo search kaze yina tembo de tolares.
If we are able to bring these four elements into balance, what happens is that the mind becomes peaceful. And once the mind is peaceful, then we're able to infuse it with a stable joy, with a stable bliss in the practice.
Tenyo selele gatone tsowa rongol tachi jine kane yongatu tane deis.
So in this relaxed, alert state of mind, let us direct our attention to mindfulness of feelings. What types of feelings are arising?
Tsowa dewa sen kane jiren, tsowa dunga sen kane jiren, tsowa dunyo sen kane jiren, tsoyi ngol mandawa kare kane.
What are the differences with those feelings? What are those feelings of happiness or pleasant feelings like? What are the feelings of unhappiness, of suffering like? Are there any neutral feelings, feelings that are neither one nor the other?
Sochega tsowa dewa la tiene decha tela tiene ane le zungenda manachi sakyares.
If we take these pleasant feelings, on the basis of these pleasant feelings, attachment can arise. And on the basis of that attachment, we can be compelled into unwholesome actions.
Telayo lech kunju demba, nyemu be kunju demba, serenesi siwoji yungunwas.
And through this contemplation, actually, using our mindfulness in this way, it can connect to the Four Noble Truths, specifically an awareness of true sufferings and true origins.
Yon so karel so dungala tene control. Tela tene tene o lenda murachi sanela. Kunju nyatsi. Rambachi yungu.
Similarly, we talked about those pleasant feelings, but when we experience unpleasant feelings or suffering, anger can arise, compelling us to engage in harmful actions. So this is another angle of true origins.
So
through close application of mindfulness on feelings, we can develop insight into true origins, the true origins of suffering. It is said that on the basis of true origins, specifically afflicted true origins, karmic true origins, these are the roots, the origins of all of the sufferings experienced within samsara.
Tendriga koyenyo da jidong jibate rungye chatsong ta mek de isa tendri meba sha so singene kaze tata laka tembo chigis.
So, in order to achieve the welfare of both oneself and others, we must completely uproot the causes of samsara. We must completely uproot samsara itself. And and in order to be able to uproot this problem of samsara, not just for myself, but also for all sentient beings, I will engage in stable practice. I will engage in the cultivation to be able to bring about perfect happiness, not just for myself, but also for others. In order to be able to actualize this, may the Lamas, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas please bestow their blessings. Just asking Geshe, I thought during the meditation he was very, very quiet, so if anyone's listening in Tibetan, but he doubts that. I think there might be a few people. All right, so let us begin with the prayers. Tumbo chomden de jin sheba dra chomba yonda bar zobe sangye
Demba Dewa Sheba Jiden Kemba Kebuduwe Kalo Gyurwa Lana Meba Ladaminam Gitemba Sangye Chomdende Begyawa Shakya Dubala Chazelo Chedo Gyabzu Jiho Tenba Chomdende Teji Sheba Dachomba Yondaba Zobe Sangye Reba Dang Shabzu Demba Dewa Sheba Jiden Chemba Chebu Dewe Kalo Gyurwa Lana Meba Ladami Namgi Temba Sangye Chomdende Pejawa Shakya Tubala Chazelo Chede Gyabzu Jiho Temba Chomdende Teji Sheba Dachomba Yandaba Zobe Sangye Reba Dang Shabzu Demba Dewa Sheba Jiten Chemba Chebu Dewe Kalo Gyurwa Lana Meba Ladami Namgi Temba Sangye Chomdende Pejawa Shakya Tubala Chazelo Chede Gyabzu Jiho. We'll do a short mandala offering. Saji Begi Joji Refuge in Bodhisattva. Chedon sogi chenam la jangchu bardu dani gyabsu chi dagi chenyen gibe sonam gi drola penjir sangye drobar sho. Chedon sogi chenam la jangchu bardu dani gyabsu chi dagi chenyen gibe sonam gi drola penjir sangye drobar sho. Chedon sogi chenam la jangche bardu dani gyabsu chi dagi chenyen gibe sonam gi drola penjir sangye drobar sho.
다 되면 되는 가로수 같으니 그냥 가르세가 리 나이 리 나이 세 아니 나세 자지 뭐 선두as.
So there are three important components that we can think about. That we call my body, that we call my mind, and that we call the self, or the capital letter I.
다 제체 가제 그냥 리파 전에 제체 가제 파겠다 와이나요. 되는 나도 나이 셈세 대하데 고 그게 눈으로야 매바지 하고 살아와. 세원이 세원도고 요봐. 다 제체
And if we look with reason, right? If we look with reason and we analyze that we call myself and my mind, we can see, based upon many reasonings, many contemplations, that this is not just something that stops at the end of this lifetime, that this is a continuity that goes from lifetime to lifetime to lifetime.
다 이나요 세야지만 다 텐디지 있어. 아니 나로서 같으니 나도 나이 같으니 나이 센스대야 존로야 만도 되니 이나요 대도 뇽돌 보게 코일리 그런 코이가 요라 뭐지와 대존로야 지와레스.
And that we call the I and that we call my mind, we have said that there is no end to that they continue from lifetime to lifetime to lifetime. But we also know that there is an end to this samsaric body, right? This physical body fades. And similarly, we can understand that there is also an end to this samsaric suffering that we experience.
다 소소 나자 침버스 대한테 제 차수 존로야지도. 소소 존로 맞아 예를 때 줘야 내 차수 때도. 근데지 말에 받은 가로서 내가도 사게요 말이스.
아게.
가로서 나스 대한테라. 아니 거의 너다 차수 존로야지도 와스.
Yes.
대존 마주 받아도.
Uh-huh.
하고 살아와 대존이라 예라요 대주야 내서 차소 때도야 마토 받아. 아니 간절레 같이 사게요 말이스.
So our work, our task as practitioners from the point of view of the self and that we call my mind, this continues until we see an end to the samsaric suffering of that. We have to see an end to the samsaric suffering of that. And not only that, after we see that end to samsara and to suffering for our own self, for our own mind, we come to a state where we also have to help all beings reach that state of the end of suffering.
어따내서 던디지와 이상 안전 도사텔 토자텔 니도와서 루데 치거동바 예데 주거동바 서는 동바니
And to be able to achieve our own welfare, the end of our own suffering, as well as to work towards the welfare of others, this is why we need the two bodies of a Buddha, the Dharmakaya, or the truth body, for our own welfare, and the Rupakaya, or the form body, through which we can achieve the welfare of others. So, right, even from this Mahayana perspective, we're not talking just about others, right? We have some benefit too, right? And that is the benefit of our own end of suffering, which is achieved through the actualization of this Dharmakaya, of this truth body. So when we talk about love and compassion, right, we're talking about the welfare of others, but clearly it's not only the welfare of others that is achieved, because at enlightenment, we also achieve this truth body through which we accomplish our own well-being.
And
because we accomplish this work through the union of this human body as well as this mind, then protecting both our physical and our mental health is something that is obviously very important. If we don't have a healthy body and we don't have a peaceful mind, it is very clear that practice becomes difficult. Training in hearing, contemplation, and meditation becomes very difficult.
So,
however, if we reify those too much, right, if we spend all of our time only trying to get the comforts for the body and mind, nice things to eat, nice things to drink, a nice place to live, there's also, right, the warning from the holy beings that this behavior is not so different than that of animals.
This was all done at the digit, and did not darling this. That the digit is a tomba nilan dogo is a telayon and low manuma chito, low posituba children dogo.
And so in order to be able to achieve the result of these two bodies, we need to follow a path which allows us to accumulate their causes, a path that is both complete and unmistaken.
어다 때도 내 돈에 다 되네. 약간 야보치 시다기 예서 베톤에 다 relation there is.
And so connected with developing our understanding of that path, let us take a moment to bring forth a motivation with a peaceful mind.
처음에 비전에 손서도 저와도 노돌아서 바kan가 지니만 노지파 여기
Think any unwholesome or useless feelings, thoughts, projections. These are just dissolved into the sky of the mind, just like the clouds are dissolved by the light of the sun.
소소라요 손지그리 자침보 타베리 자침보 손지심베리 자침보 다 야부스 주바지요 선바지.
Think within myself, I have the Buddha nature, the potential for enlightenment. I have the potential for liberation. I have the potential to become a Bodhisattva.
던지그리 자침보 되지 멀리때도 아니 뇽돌이야 있을 때 간지게 되는 것 같이 뭐지 말겠어.
Because these potentials abide at the same time, I have this precious human rebirth. I have an amazing opportunity in my hand.
소소로요 반우지 소소그 천디그 예 소소도 뇽돌이요 기다 미 던도 가왈다와 이나요 다 드리그리 자침보디 요바 기바렌드 스리 자침보디 차덴드.
Just as I have all of these precious potentials within my mind, so do all of those who are close to me. So do all of my friends. So do all of the animals I interact with. Indeed, so do all sentient beings.
천들었다와인 시와가마도 심하가와 다와이나요 선제 설었다와이나요 뭐 시바도 뭐 시바 강가 예 임발을 다 이제 타유바시도.
If I take the perspective of not just this life, but of all the lifetimes in the past, and of all my lifetimes in the future, there's not one sentient being I can say that has always been far away from me. Every last one has been close to me, has been connected to me at one point.
모두 던도 체주가와라 따이나요 소소겠다 예자치 뭐 이더공아 지레도 마도 이더 뭐고 지주만도 선바지.
Understanding this connection, really feel that every last being, whether animal, human, and so forth, is all attractive, is beautiful. View them with that mind of affectionate love, understanding that we are connected.
대달은 내가 시주도 가와 편편의 피니 면지 편바적이야 주종래
And with that understanding, that affectionate love, there is no question of harming any of these sentient beings whatsoever. In fact, we want to benefit them. I will benefit them as much as possible.
마로롱기 수지 살티그 드리자 대덕의 체트는 손지지 공부 도바샤기 놈에 손지지 세 더버스이다.
Because they are connected to me, I must lead them all to enlightenment. But first, I must achieve Buddhahood myself. Therefore, bring forth the motivation of bodhicitta thinking. I must achieve complete enlightenment for the benefit of all beings.
덴데저 토그레 수지지 공부 제세가르에서는 롱진절 콜 공배도지 요아르테네 이나 덴바 주제 소용문도
I can definitely achieve this state of enlightenment, and I can definitely bring forth bodhicitta. Why? The main obstacle to that, self-cherishing, does not have any root in truth whatsoever. Therefore, it can definitely be cleared away, and I can bring this forth. It is only there due to habituation.
마리바이나요. 단즈 마리발다와이. 단즈 마리발다와이나요. 콜 공배도 대슈 정보지알 마도. 덴비차 주제 소용문도
Similarly, the ignorance grasping at the self, the ignorance grasping at permanence, none of these have any grounding in truth or reflect reality. They are powerful within us only due to our habituation.
가윙군이 뽑아치민군이 롱진즈도 단즈 마리바 매바서 이 서파치.
And so then think, with this brave attitude, I will definitely eradicate the ignorance grasping at permanence and the ignorance grasping at the self. So in this way, we've completed the motivation. And of course, bringing forth these thoughts, reflecting on the motivation, reflecting on it is easy, but to actualize the motivation is not really easy, right? But the point is actually, if we're able to think in these positive ways like we do in the meditation, we'll see through the experience that the afflictions are humble. In other words, they aren't as powerful as we might have thought. So if we can have the introspection to be aware when we're first kind of falling into that attachment or that anger arising, and when we familiarized ourselves with the reasoning of the antidotes that help to diminish that attachment or anger, what we're able to do is we're able to kind of place that afflicted mind in check before it becomes something really powerful. So we know that anger, right? The analogy given for it is being like fire, right? So it's easier to put out when it's small. And attachment is actually said to be like oil. So if you put a little drop of oil on a piece of paper or on a piece of cloth, you try to scrub it out immediately. If not, we know that that oil will eventually pervade the entire surface, right? And then it'll be much more difficult. So it's easy just to clean or even just to cut off a little corner of that paper or cloth where the oil is. But if we leave it for too long and the oil pervades it, then the whole article can be spoiled, right? And similarly, if we recognize that anger right at the beginning, when the fire is still small, a small fire, it's easy to put that fire out. Much easier, isn't it? But the bigger the fire gets, right, the harder it is to put out. and the more destructive it becomes, right? If we think about in our world today, all of the terrible bushfires and forest fires that happen, we can see that really clearly.
어다 여보다와 이는 다 단단 먹에도 뭐주도 내요도 차소 야 저 여보칸 이긴디 와스.
Kare,
저도
adashitasu.
그러니까
And similarly, when we look at the problems in the world, like illnesses, like wars, conflicts, instability, we can understand that all of these are symptoms that can be traced back to these fundamental problems of attachment and anger.
소소설 따와 이는 멋지나 이렇게 보면 봐서 그때 간이랜데 아니 누가 차송학기 보면 봐서 그때 간이랜데
When we look at our own experience, what's causing us unhappiness most of the time is usually because of attachment or anger. So that's on the individual level, but actually the same is true on the collective level in any organization, in any workplace, even between countries in the world. When that unhappiness arises, it's often connected with that attachment or anger.
다 내서 들리지 자 대니 당길라바 노지 빠랄 제와시키 로지 류만 제마 토나 하고서 와서 어느 때가 가지하고 또너 당게들에서 녀다
Keparchea mebasotu기도 하던.
제와시야 칸이 소정이나 데레 듀도 문두 얘네 듀도 문두 빠져서야지.
So the point is, if we have to bring forth a discerning mind that is really questioning, is really evaluating, is the way I'm seeing things right now through that lens of attachment, through that lens of anger, true or not? Is that in accord with reality? If we can't do that, it's difficult to diminish them.
미미 칸일 때에서 따져서 내월에서 그요 녀모로 아빠로 요버로 왔어. 나저 말이 바디 데스 갈래 카와서 그요 알아왔어.
And actually with attachment and anger, it's said to be easier to engage in that process of questioning, to be able to use that questioning or that examination to undermine them. When we talk about the ignorance grasping at the self, that affliction is more subtle, right? So it's more challenging to do.
대 미께자 가르치기요 알았어. 미 따져서 키티가 소소 쳐보시야 노지 때 할레비 차게 쓰게서 가야만 소소 통화 노지 야 말다 뭐 관계 뒤집어 두고만 돼와.
So how would this work? Let's give an example. When we're viewing a person or a thing that we are through that lens of attachment, we step back for a moment and we think, God, there's no reason to get kind of so nervous or so beside myself with attachment for this object or this person, because a lot of people don't think that this person or that thing is so great, which shows that my perception might not be the be all and end all of how it really is.
대 든다 지지보 근데 처음 느껴서 살았어요. 알았어. 이나시나.
Dundachik?
든디 손스 지보티.
Yeah.
내가 배드 님보 때그요 말. 든디 손스 찔레 차서나. 내가 그걸 보기 때문에 먹어서 살았어.
So it is said that if we're able to, I noticed the light changed. It's okay. So even if we are able to think in that way, just for a week or so, it is said that actually that strong attachment is completely destabilized, right? It is completely diminished.
그냥 컨트롤 쇼리나. 그냥 소소소만 노지 말다. 뭐 관계 뒤져 두고만 돼와. 저런 노지.
So also through that lens of anger, is the way I'm perceiving that person or that thing really in accord with reality? Because not everybody hates it in the way I do, right? Others think it's perfectly fine. So it's another way to challenge that thinking.
야, 콜 두번이나 뭐원도 가고치게 뭐원도와. 그라 컨트롤 거시대 잘해 살았어요.
So he or she has a lot of friends, actually. They have a lot of friends and a lot of family members who really think that they're great. It's just this lens of my anger that I'm seeing them through. That's exaggerating all of their faults, right?
자산 예시에서 컨트롤 자산 예시에서 대가로 매워서 살았어.
Yeah. And if you question that perception, right? If you question that perception, you've already sort of addressed 50 or 60% of that anger, right? Because you've seen how it's not in accord with reality.
미미 땡기에 내서 렌도와스 덴바레 마도 즈마마로 왔어. 대냐 드니 다지 제도 돼.
And to check just using that very sort of easy way, it's perfectly in accord with the reality of things, because it is a given fact that not everybody perceives that person in the same way that you do, right?
단내서 든디징에 내트리와 이제 내저 더보도 군로 더보 자기서 속에 한번 더 헬레데아렌드스.
And so if we use these lines of reasoning, we can see when there's a bit of a lens of anger, when there's a little bit of a lens of attachment to a person or object that arises, we don't need to be beside ourselves with nervousness, right? To be overcome by those, right? We can question those reactions.
다 든지지레데 다 든지 계자 주주로 와서 가지고 된다. 너무 뒤에서 든지 와도 야겠네서 주주래야 돼요.
So really the essence of the Dharma is this. Everything that we talk about is really an antidote to help to uproot those three poisons, those three root afflictions of attachment, anger, and ignorance.
리송아. 야. 다 가두이다.
Yes. So now we turn to the text for those of you who are wondering, when do we get there? We are there. We are on page 8, and we are about on the middle of the page.
당기 때지 라테인도 와서 라테지 요바르지 때에서 손을 떠난 것들은 야 때데
So what Geshe just shared with you now, he said, is something that he hopes is easy to bring forth in the mind. Because those lines of reasoning are easy to bring forth into the mind, they're tools that you can directly use, right, when you're experiencing that attachment or anger.
다 멜로 때는 가정가만이 현주 야소시 멜로 때를 영행 주의서 그는 이제 멜로 첨부 찌르요 와스 찌르고는 다 찌찌이 놓쳐와레스.
And so then we were saying that this text of the King of Prayers is divided into the preliminary, the actual text, and the conclusion. And within the actual prayer, there are 16 outlines. And within those 16, we are at about number 11.
다 주니로.
Yeah, so now we come to number 12.
다 주니 그 멜로 주니 바텔 메 가르타 그래서나 롱게 머트슈지 점머니 비또. 롱게 머트슈지 점머니 바스리 머트슈가 친내바 때부터 봐.
And so this prayer, I would translate it as something like able to disable any unfortunate conditions, or able to disable any hindering conditions. In other words, the hindering conditions are not able to impede us.
또 정인에 때도 손지기 살려하래. 다시 한번 손질려 와스. 또 just 간다 또 적게 제시기.
And then we'll find that there is a discussion of 10 powers within the texts that are related to this.
또 다시 한번 때도 손질려 와스.
So the perfection of get your drink. So the perfection of those 10 powers, right, in their full kind of impact is only possessed by a fully enlightened Buddha. However, the Bodhisattvas, although they might not possess these 10 powers in a perfect way, they will possess many of these 10 powers nominally, right, at various strengths. And so we need all of these 10 powers and so forth to be able to proceed along the path. And so within the text, right, there are prayers, aspirations that are made to achieve all of those. So when we talk about power, actually, the word that's translated as power here, top, in Tibetan can also be translated as strength. Right? So you can think of these things as a power or a strength. So Geshe said, when you are strong, right, you don't need to be worried about being overcome by external obstacles.
Although
the Tibetans say that some people say that if the body is too strong or too big, this can also make one vulnerable to attack, right? So happy medium. So they talk about like it's like a loaf of bread, right? So if the loaf of bread is too big, it's not powerful, right? It also becomes vulnerable. So we want to develop them in kind of a middle way. So in terms of what the prayer is explaining in terms of these powers or these strengths, these are inner powers, right? Inner strengths that we want to develop. Yeah. So the first type of power is known as the power of magical emanation. Actually, the Tibetan word zutrugitop, it's actually legs of magical emanation, but I think the translator didn't put legs in there because it's kind of confusing.
다这个또是是吧？这个또 다 야跟着你这또 는 동 세리 아니跟着녀와 세리 하고서라跟着녀와 세리 할레빈 주보 게 잘했어 저도.
May I achieve the power of swift magical emanation. So Geshe said the swift here, this means that those magical activities are achieved very quickly, right, in a very fast way.
다 뒤는 다 레와르지 놀로 쪼지 될서는 체와 피하를 자야지 세제가 대제야를 자야지.
Yeah.
다 든지게 내서 요하레스.
So in terms of these powers of magical emanation in the commentary, it mentions two in particular, which is the power of being able to make unsurpassable offerings and and the power to be able to accomplish the welfare of sentient beings. So those are the two connected with magical emanation.
일단 줘야 말다. 아니 손지가 시 타이 발 디세 투둘 파게. 디세 투두지가 놀라.
Yeah.
아니 손지 쇼지 손지 강갈 체와 비도야. 디세 투두지가 놀라 생제가 대 타이 비대도 저도야.
So in one moment, in a very short amount of time, to be able to make offerings to all of the Buddhas, the holy ones in countless Buddha fields or Pure Lands, and also in the space of a small increment of time, in a tiny amount of time, to be able to spontaneously manifest to bring benefit to every last sentient being.
디세 투두지가 놀라 손지가 시 가와이냐를 비긴 로토야.
And so what does that mean? It means that with this magical emanation, just in the space of like one tiny increment of time, we can travel to all of the Buddha fields to make offerings.
다 끝내지 대돈다이 다 저저 사고 온저야 또 놀 피야도 다 저들은다 만다요.
Yeah. And then on the more worldly level, when we talk about these magical emanations, right, we talk about being able to move unobstructedly into the sky, under the ground, and anywhere else.
다 시도 저도 예시 세아데 저틀라요 예시라요 예시 주 예시가이나 주이나지 요아래 아니 예시 찌마도 아니 쇼로발라 요아래 시도.
So when we talk about these magical emanations, they are often explained as magical emanations and clairvoyance, as two sort of siddhis. Tambodi trukyore nipadi ngayore, right?
다 텔라마기라스. 예시 주 논네 예시가 쇼로발라 요아래. 다
And within the clairvoyances, there are said to be 6 types of clairvoyance. And holders of outsider tenets, in other words, practitioners of other religious systems, through their practices, they can achieve 5 out of those 6 clairvoyances.
다 나잉예시 제잉예시 예신담으로 요아 대지간가 요아래.
So you have like, I don't even know the English word for these, but like clairaudiences. So it's like the magical being able to hear everything, being able to see everything, being able to smell everything. So all of those connected with the sense doors.
다 이나요 사바세빙예시 사바세는 예모보잉예시지 요아래. 대요 말했어.
But there is a clairvoyance of completely abandoning afflictions. So that clairvoyance of completely abandoning afflictions, that is not achievable by the holders of outsider tenets. In other words, by those non-Buddhist schools. It is only achievable within the Buddhist practice.
다 저도 예시 세아트 또 띵엔서 요래 도월려소나. 그래서 왔더니 저도 예시 릴라보토네 대학에서 요아레스.
And in terms of being able to achieve both the magical emanation and these various types of clairvoyance, you might ask, well, how is it that these are achieved? Most of them are connected with developing samadhi, or single-pointed concentration.
당금망금망이네 당간조지 안에서 같이 못지라 어느 시부터 뭐 자침보 아니 계시 착가와 계시 생각와서 또 계시
뱅군겔
아
뱅군겔
말아 계시 생각와
생각와 로스로스 그다음바 계신 거 맞죠?
아까도 계시니 아레스 생각와도 트리프 생각와도 부주바이나 지서다 계시니 아레스
야야 불충바에
그야 코로니 파지 계제시니라 아니 계시도 저틀 토네 야가레 손주 조지가 손주 로데게네스 보게 좋아하시는 대야가레스 그러니 계제시오레스.
So Geshe wants to tell a story connected with these points, and the story goes back to 2 Kadampa Geshes. The Kadampa Geshes are those great Geshes of the past. The first one was Geshe Chengawa, and he thinks the second one was Geshe Puchungpa. But anyways, they were sort of debating between themselves that in terms of the practice, is it better to try to develop these siddhis of like clairvoyance, magical emanations, and so forth, or is it better to actualize the instructions contained within Atisha's lamp for the path?
다 지등 가서 메이드 돼서 노스 생각하고 있네래서 생각하고 메이드
Yeah. Yeah, so Geshe it's two Kadampa Geshes. The first one is definitely Geshe Chengawa, but the second one he's not totally sure of the name. Maybe Puchungwa.
미사바시 소리를 맞죠.
Yeah. So you just make up whatever name you can if you can't remember, right?
다들 그러니까 이제 그냥 지티고 다 그러니 파트 노사 이자. 나이 이나나 예시도 저저 토발에. 현주로저런 바티가 된다 때에서 그게 소화수는 뒤야가 저기요.
So they were talking back and forth, and at one point Chingawa said, okay, I've thought a lot about this, and well, it's good to achieve the magical emanations, clairvoyance, and so forth. Having thought about the lamp of the path, I think it's better to achieve the realizations of the lamp of the path. I have a little bit more of a feeling for that.
저세 가르에서는 아주 관계 단답받은 예시도 저저 다 타이바스 도차와래.
Why is that? Because all of us in countless previous lifetimes, we have time and again been able to achieve various siddhis of magical emanations and clairvoyance, but it hasn't brought much benefit.
이나요 거래 타와래 단답하지스는 배도시면 되와스.
Even having achieved that clairvoyance or those magical emanations, we continue to circle within samsara, so it's clear there was no great advantage.
조지가 전주 로델라 때는 그게 알레 뚜바 마세와 이나요. 뒤된다 돼서 세지 받쳐 잡아 이나요. 될라 때는 갈래갈래 야르야르 돈내라 거래 타와 먹으신데.
However, if one thinks about Joje about Atisha's lamp of the path, if one even is not necessarily able to bring forth a complete realization of it, but able to develop an understanding, and based upon that understanding, put an imprint for the path to enlightenment in one's mind, one has achieved an important cause of being able to be free of samsara or cyclic existence.
다든지 사시부터 막 첨보지가 들이 받을 수 있어요. 스터는 아주 때스 명인의 전에 야 좋아요 때인데 때서 요트 그게
So this was said by Geshe Chenghwa and this other great Kadampa Geshe, two highly realized masters, seeing the importance of realizing that. And so then definitely this is advice that applies to us as well.
nganzu tezi kwaya tela jisa yuru yapo chini tezo karmato dwa otsi ya so
Kare jesu ira.
sene lo shonjul mi ya lo ro ne ase kare yana tezi nganzu ko gdiwa tela kazi tata jisa yuru ta ga ya yarndo ya tashi to kar.
So what we have to do is whatever understanding we've been able to develop on the stages of the path up until now, we have to rejoice in that, understanding its importance, and also make the determination to improve it and improve it.
다 zitse ya to ga chimbo ta ya te nganzu nyama kashi jile chocho melu ti shesene le gdiwa. Yes.
So magical emanations is very interesting because on Tuesday we have this day of miracles. It's often translated as Chutrul Duchen, and this relates to a story of the Buddha kind of manifesting incomprehensible magical emanations. So we can speak about those magical emanations of a great being in terms of the magical emanations related to body, the magical emanations related to speech, and the magical emanations related to mind.
아니 다 치대니 그렇게 저트세나 뭐데 치야 수게 초초 요하라와스 하고서와
Correct?
수 순지 치수니를 다 보게
Yeah.
야
Kawala. Pagisana.
초초를 뭐뭐디와스 수지대가 초초
Ale.
그 저거 초초 뭐뭐요하래.
Yes. So there are many different types of miracles, right? There are the miraculous aspects of speech and the miraculous aspects of body and so forth.
이나요 아니 저때 수지대가 초초들이야 마도 그 순게들이야 마도 아니 그때 뭐 그이 저때 말해서 요하래.
But we should understand that in terms of an enlightened being, the main miraculous aspect, the main magical emanation is related to speech. It is actually not about the body, about the physical form.
어떤 뭐 지시야 거기서 야본인은 지금 매에서 더니 또 뭐엘티 타들 아니 그이 저때 다 더니 다 뭐지기 요하래.
So on this particular occasion, when the Buddha was first preaching the Dharma, the audience, the assembled audience, was not so inclined to listen. So then as a skillful means, he employed magical emanations related to the body, physical manifestations, in order to make them able to receive the teaching.
다 알게 좀 뭐를 갈갈들어. 근데 니 저쪽에 또 진리성아.
Yep.
근데 이거에 태비도 매미 또 아기는 태비도 동보들 저쪽에 또 니빠들 태비도.
And so then the next one, kuni nyurwe zutru top namdang, kuni goyi tekpe top dagni, di tekpe top, right?
또 동서는 니빠들 태비도 동보들 저쪽에 또.
So then we come to the next one, the power to lead to the great vehicle through every approach. So we can say the power of the great vehicle.
그래서 다 태비도 세한테 다시 동바서 이제 뭐뭐자기 알아서 지금 동바 뭐다 뭐를들어서 봐 걸어서서는 대바침비가 내서 집어지기가 내서 태비도
Teba karen.
야 대바침비가 다 내서 뭐뭐지 알아왔어. 신요래 뭐뭐다.
And so then Nagarjuna and other great masters have explained the power to lead to the great vehicle is simply all of the teachings and practices of the Mahayana Dharma. That's really what is meant here.
다 파시 둘이잖아. 저기 아래 저는 준비고 아니 저거 띵엔서 그거 시라 그거서는 다것 뭐뭐지 해줘 알아서.
Gomgo.
대바서.
Right. And so then we can say that, for example, go like not so door.
Yeah.
So we can say that we can talk about the power to lead to the great vehicle through every approach. We can say that the power of the great vehicle is the 6 perfections, for example, the door to the approach through generosity, the door through the approach through ethics, and so forth.
다이어트 약이 개발이 지금서는 예티가 태비고 어느 루자가 태비고 하고 쇼지스비 태비고서는 어떤 의자 알아서.
Ale, ine di consultation kyokpo
대장
katsuglagi래.
말하게
테니 거기면 디스코통소.
세시오 대바치 뭐 집을 야야지 인도 왔어. 다이어트 예티가 태비고 루자가 태비고 쇼지스비 태비고.
So the door of the great vehicle is what is explained by most scholars, but then some scholars also say that we can speak of the power to lead through the great vehicle, but through various doors. So, for example, through the doors of the solitary realizers, through the doors of the hearers, and through the other various doors.
다 강가를 걸려야셔도 고추군도 야본도 왔어. 배나 존재 삼바서 얘나 예티가 태비고 루자가 태비고라서 막 강가 요래체 그 요아래 토그 요아래.
And it's good to maybe understand it in that sort of broader way, because we understand that even for those who are going through the Bodhisattva door, through the Mahayana vehicle, those Bodhisattvas also need to train in many practices shared in common with the solitary realizers, in many practices shared in common with the Shravakas or the hearers.
뒤에 가도이나요. 존재세비지는 예티가 로요아래 루자가 로요아래 아니 태지가 로요용으로 존재세 말아봤어.
Yeah. So then as a Bodhisattva practitioner, right, we have to cultivate aspects of the path of solitary realizers, aspects of the path of hearers, and certainly all of the aspects of the Bodhisattva path. So all of these are important practices.
이제 가르레서는 존재세 대야 되게 생체 요소가 대적이 세계 알았더니 대바서가 대적으로.
And why is this the case? Because a Bodhisattva, he or she has to work for the benefit of all sentient beings. And to be able to achieve that, they also need the practices for those who have affinities with the hearers, the solitary realizers, and so forth.
어떤지 봤지? 태비고 리슨 태비도 리송아.
Yep.
오야. 다 근데 예대시비도 예비도.
So then the next one is the power of always beneficial activity. The power of always beneficial activity.
다야 근데 예대시비도 서로 존재세비겠더니 시비도 되라. 시바 파셔주 대인이 보시. 어다 드리기 시바 벌써 좀 뭐요 알아봤어.
So Ngumadi Parshin
So
Geshe said that the next one, the power of always beneficial activities, is all of the various activities of the Bodhisattva. So actually it shares some practices common with the ones that we mentioned in regards to the previous. We talked about the 6 paramitas or the 6 perfections, but also the 4 ways of gathering disciples and so forth. So these are the beneficial activities, which are the methods through which, the skillful means through which the Bodhisattva is able to bring great perfect benefit to all different types of beings. So the Bodhisattva has all of these methods to be able to, for example, to manifest in a way that those who are experiencing physical difficulties or difficulties with body can identify with and receive help. Able to manifest in a way that those experiencing mental illness, mental difficulties, and so forth are able to accept and receive their help, right? The Bodhisattvas can manifest in countless ways.
당한도 디셈마도 마도 가정어마 손지나요 뭐 괜찮지 뭐 주주가라 파마니 신화질 봐줘하니라 아니 손지지마 때도 나오지 전에 걸어 봐줘서 왔어.
So Geshe said there's not time to tell the entire story, but I think he's told it before, right? We have that story about there was a baby that was born somehow deformed, right? It didn't have a pleasant appearance, and the parents were not really able to love it or to care for it. So they put it in a sort of remote sort of forest, and that baby grew up. And the Buddha actually manifested as somebody with a similar sort of disability to be able to help him, right? So there's that story as well.
어때요? 갈래 로보샤는 코프게 지가 까면 야보지 야이자. 아고서로 알레비 야보지 왔어 타마.
And slowly, because the Buddha was able to manifest in a way that he could identify with, that he could feel safe with, finally he came to a very great result, a very high realization.
라마 송승이 야래서는 손지 코론다 오지 괜찮지 저와저 야이자. 아니 그 손지 고통을 손지 코로 파딘도 하지. Dino yares. Shinola. On kicks and Timado, Nandevashi miss and kick. Mackenzie Lagin to us.
Yabukomaso.
Sunji Kenzachi to what you are was, Coronda Wanachi.
Yeah.
And a copatino was Sunji.
Super
Coron Tubicala.
Yeah.
And a Mackenzie Timano, Nandevashi get a miss. Mackenzie Sunjil.
Yabukomaso, sorry.
No matter say him bus, don't. Sen kezaji nomba yara was kezako nyeg mara. Mani sonji tubi gala. Sonji te shen no zor kopatino grawas.
Kawa partrijo is.
Shino jil tu yungar was.
So then when the Buddha first approached him, even though the Buddha was manifesting in this kind of a strange way, right? He was kind of not going directly to meet him, right? And then that man who was the baby that was put in the forest, he said, I'm not somebody who harms others, right? Don't be afraid. You don't need to run away.
And finally,
this aspect of the Buddha, right, who had the same handicap, he was able to kind of gain his trust. They were able to take meals together, and slowly, the Buddha was able to lead him to higher and higher realization.
Geshe
is like, if Kedrup's tired, he pretends he doesn't understand. No, it's not that I pretend I don't understand. I actually don't, right? Because like I remember the story. What happens is I remember the story a certain way, and then it's like it's the same meaning, but it's different words, and then I get confused. I have my limitations, so my apologies. It's no, I know it is no. We have told this story before. Yes, I do remember that. So really, like trying to, this story can really show us that, you know, these days there's so many people that are experiencing various kind of physical disabilities. There's certainly many people that are experiencing a lot of like mental illness, right? Various kind of mental illnesses. If we can try to make ourselves safe for someone who those people can identify with, right? Then we will definitely be able to bring them to benefit. So don't think that like these are just the activities that the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas engage in, so we have no responsibility to try to help people experiencing those kind of situations, because certainly within our means, right, we want to do as much as we can to help them. And this is really a skillful means, right? A skillful means to be able to help all of those beings in ways that they can receive it. And the next one is, the final one, the power of love pervading all realms.
tani shomba gonela ane senje radar yu pasi neba machine logi yuares.
And so the power of love, we also talk about the power of Buddha Maitreya, which is the power of love. And this goes back to remember that story where in previous lives, Maitreya and Buddha Shakyamuni, I think they were brothers or close relations, and they came konsultak.
Me te ju mares.
Ale kare.
Sonji shawa ngama chela. Ane ko sonji koro shomba gone de yuaisa. Lumba koro le kedo chanela.
Loso.
ring senje pasi neba shi yu mares.
Ale, mare di ngachan.
Ta sonji uchi yuar ha chuto chemo kana.
Ale loso ale sorry. Loso.
Agosara ane teni tini senje yenda kenza chi lebe kala.
Ale.
Kare senje ji pasi neba shi go mdiwa. Ngando jabo go shomba gone de yuares.
Ale. So this is actually related to it's a story similar to of another person, but it's not the story I was thinking. It's another story about the Buddha in a previous life as a Bodhisattva. And he, in that lifetime, was a king who then kind of went to an isolated place to meditate. And it is said that in this kingdom, in this land, right, none of the animals hurt each other. And that was because of the power of his love that he brought forth in that meditation. So this story, as it relates to the Buddha, right? Because there's a similar story of Togme Sangpo, right? But this one of the Buddha is actually a very beautiful story. But Geshe said it's quite long and quite heavy, so maybe we will share it in the future. Ale, loso. And the story has to do with a man who came to that land where the Buddha in his previous life was meditating and none of the animals hurt each other. And he kind of disliked the meditator and he disliked the situation because he was somebody who wanted to go like hunting, right? He made his liver as a hunter. Simjin Segen Lekaro. Yes, he was kind of like some sort of a flesh-eating being. Loso. And so this being, he had some kind of regret. So I'm not sure if he was a human or a non-human being, but he very much liked flesh. And so he thought, like, if I approach this meditator, if I try to approach, I could eat a lot of meat here because the animals are abiding peacefully. But if I try to approach the king so that I can undermine the meditation so that I can eat meat, because of my unpleasant sort of demonic appearance, the bodyguards, whoever's protecting him, may try to stop me from reaching the hermitage. Yeah, so this is a kind of spirit known as Nujin. So it's a flesh-eating spirit. It has a similar human form. I think it's Rakshasa in Sanskrit, if I'm not mistaken. And somehow this Rakshasa demon, he managed to take on, this is why, he managed to take on a human appearance and fool whoever the guard was and lead him to that meditator, right? The Buddha in his previous life. And so then when he reached the Buddha in his past life, that great meditator, he dropped that costume or that appearance of the human form and he showed his form as a Rakshasa, right? As this flesh-eating demon. It's a Nuchin, when we mentioned in the Haruka commentary. And he said to the Buddha, you know, like the being who became the Buddha, I need food to survive. And at that time, the Buddha wasn't yet the fully enlightened Buddha, right? But he was a Bodhisattva with the power of love, as mentioned here. I said to, and so the story ends, I said to Geshe, you can't leave it hanging there, but the story ends with the Bodhisattva, right? The Buddha in his previous life offering his body to that Rakshasa demon so that he wouldn't harm any other beings.
어다 이렇게 좀 뭐래. 어다 디스 다 단다 저 대로 도 말해 되는 아주 티송아스. 근데 잡아 쇼비또 세나 쇼바세나 소소 녀지볼 쇼바 많이 봐. 아니 미지볼 쇼바 많이 봐. 로아리 지금 생제 요소를 차비게 다네 쇼비고 또 침보지요나. 다 쇼비또 세나 던지지가 알았어.
So when we speak about the power of love pervading all realms, what does that mean? It means a love not just for the people that we like, for the people that are close to us, a love not just for human beings, but indeed a love without bias, an equal love for all of the 6 types of beings within samsara, within cyclic existence.
어때 근데 쇼바 지보용 말이다. 쇼바 지보 존재스미 레토 비칸 요 말아왔어.
And so this is a power of love. So the power of love has a connotation of something a little bit higher because, of course, when we talk about love in the ordinary instance, even like bodhisattvas, right? Even like sort of early level bodhisattvas can possess that. But this is the 상계기 jampa.
손지도 말이야. 진짜 뭐제 도벌 거마도 신내와 콘도도 드니네와 진시 못하기지 그 말이야.
And so this love is only achievable by beings in a higher state because it is a love that anger cannot somehow damage or anger cannot somehow undermine.
언리서와 다티 이체들 알랭아도 또 시된도 사서.
Yes. So in this way, we have covered 4 of those powers, or as I said, you could also translate it as 4 of those strengths.
다음에 또 어쨌든 미에만 저기 뒤에서 와.
Ah,
또 어쨌든 미에만 저기 와.
lelos.
세누가 또 나와.
So then the next one is the power of surpassing positive potential.
이시가 또
The next one is the power of supreme knowledge. I would actually translate this as supreme wisdom, rather.
다 넘바지와 거바서 치치는 요아레스.
So then there is wisdom, skillful means, and samadhi. These are sometimes counted as 1.
시라가 또 타가 또 띵엔즈가 또 대서 다마 치치는 요아스.
So wisdom, skillful means, and samadhi, these are all in one line of the text.
아니 다마 다또 치미야 디디븐라고 또 글라데는 토야게 돼. 존주가 또
And the next one, may I achieve the perfect power of awakening. So that power of awakening is the supreme power, the supreme strength that arises having accumulated the others.
하고서와 어다 또 저티가 다 거기서 손지이나 이제 대야 다 그거 다 치수 그래. 그랬더니 존재 선바서이나 자 치수를 간주이나 다 드는 니바들 소속 토나 그러니까 버레스.
So these powers are what allow the Buddhas to perfectly accomplish the welfare of sentient beings. They are what allow the Bodhisattvas to be able to work for the benefit of others. So if we can possess some aspect of these powers or strength, how wonderful in being able to benefit others.
어디서와 어다 대지 강갔더니 쪼쪼더니 가리 좀바더니 이제 자와 집에 쇼주 세프게 소와 줘벌었더니 우그건두스.
Yeah. And all of and that final one especially has to arise in conjunction with that bodhicitta, which is rooted in love and compassion.
쇼주 세 소만 노지 거기 내가 따따 롱가 로토야서 기테서래서나 하고서와 좀바더니 쇼주 세 소만 노지 거기 따따 롱가 로토바 바시메바 조기테서래서나 돈이 또 비시라 텐데 또 비시라더레스.
So if we ask, what is it which allows us to accomplish the aims on that path motivated by love and compassion without hindrance, without difficulty? What actually allows us to achieve those bodhisattva aims? We could say that it is the wisdom realizing emptiness.
어다 똥바 땡주 똥바게 대대 버게 초아때 무슨 문두나 좀바더니 손지세 가세 사치모 또 첨보이나 야보시 손도 또 때마다 당연히도 매워서 도야만.
And also we understand that if we don't understand the wisdom of dependent arising or the wisdom of emptiness, as much as we might bring forth love, compassion, and bodhicitta, and as wonderful as those minds are, we won't be able to completely eradicate the true enemy of ignorance, which will be holding us back.
어다 가니 길로도 맛을 지바리는데 와서 다도 다 벌써 쏘바시라 벌써 쏘바 바로 바시 지로 바시 된다.
So we really want to understand how both the practices of method and wisdom, they actually reinforce and they assist each other, right? They need each other in a way.
다 던지지자 알레 땡주게 돼 대하실로 같이 있어.
So, in accordance with that, with the importance of wisdom, let us cover at least one verse of Lama Tsongkhapa's In Praise of Dependent Arising.
주니바디다 또 가서 때서 너도 다 대주지.
So Geshe said, although we did cover part of verse 12, just for continuity, he would like to start there, and then we'll continue down.
델리 도바 통화나 돈라 샤와 무르시 샤도지라 돈메비 영행요도 르와 예.
Whereas, so we are on page 10, verse number 12, whereas when one sees the opposite, since there can be no function in emptiness, nor emptiness in what has functions, one falls into a dreadful abyss you maintain.
다 공라 로지 메바 깨자 뭐시 가청벌에서 깨자 시사하러 왔어.
제제제.
공라
So, 가리 켈쳔보레스?
단다 주니 그티 공라 로지 메바.
Yeah.
데마 메바.
So, in the previous verses, we were talking about a lack of true existence and lack of inherent existence, and why this is important to understand.
다 근데 로지 메바 시기라 단다 테케 말레니 하고서라 델리 도바. 로지 메바 델리 도바 로지 접아 거기로 왔어.
So, whereas one sees the opposite mean talking about things lacking true existence, one isn't able to comprehend that. So one doesn't see them as lacking true existence, one sees the opposite. One thinks that they exist inherently.
아니 가 어주자네 때는 가리 로지 접아 요아레 소노톤에 대바 이나스. 아니 로지 집에 동아텔 샤와 강가 요아토고 말해.
So if one is holding the opposite, one is holding that things truly exist, then 되네?
로지 집에 동아한테 요아토고 말아봐. 로지 집에 동아한테 시에 마토나 로지 집에 동아텔라. 아니 레서 아케요 봐. 되네 데디버 뇨케요 봐. 계시에 토고 말해.
And so if one is not able to understand that lack of inherent existence, and if one understands that things exist inherently, then it follows that one cannot understand how within emptiness there can be functions. And here Geshe is saying like the doer of the karma, the action itself, the accumulation, and so forth.
덴바 시사한다바 사죠 로가 쇼지선배 로강가 되니 계시에서 요아토고 말해.
And similarly, if one comes on this faulty reasoning, one cannot properly explain the Four Noble Truths. 가르추?
덴바시 덴데열로 지니 되니 사 로가 사죠.
The 12 links of dependent arising, the 10 grounds, the 5 paths, and so forth.
어디서와 만튼치 고런도 도따다 거기도와.
Los.
샤네 샤도지라 돈메비 샤와도 지발라 아니 로지 집에 돈한테 요아마 샤와도 지바 요아르자라바 이나 아니 로지 집에 받으셔서
Yes, I upset. Sorry. It's like I get half of a sentence and I think I'm expected to fill it in, but I don't know what I'm supposed to fill in.
야 가시 샤와 강가 요아르자라바 이나
Yes.
하고 살아와
Yep.
아니 돈한테 야사라 요아마레 또 로지 집에 돈
Yeah. Di kongso nortu, right?
야야 노제
And so what the person is saying here, they're holding to inherent existence because they say that if you hold the emptiness of inherent existence, you cannot propose functionality. For example, the doer, the accumulation of karma, and so forth. They fall into that misunderstanding.
된다 가르세기 가르세는 로지 집에 가디인 아주자네 대바 이나 요나 따달 흔도 그래 요나 체달 흔도 그래 될 마도 로섬면 돼.
So what Tsongkhapa here is saying is that if we are holding on to even a little bit of inherent existence, either our views will fall into the extreme of existence, or they will fall into the extreme of nihilism. There is no other place to go.
This one, the 지자 로지 집에 동아도 땡주님 보대. 하고서 로지 집에 동아도 땡주님 보대 된다. 그게 찌바요 봐지. 그게 로이다 마샤바다. 아니 때 내생이네 들어가고 말이야.
So as long as one is not able to see the harmony of that emptiness of inherent existence and that function of dependent arising, one is always in danger of falling into extreme views.
레 동보나 와타사 바트니 민파 가스노 또이나 때에서 고대워 로지 집에 동아 잘라바이나. 하고서 예라 마티비 동아 잘라기야 대병 때에서 고토고 왔어.
So for a beginner, if we say empty of true existence or empty of inherent existence, one easy way to think of that is it is empty of arising independently, right? It is empty of arising by itself, not depending on other factors.
로즈 매바 예라 마티비 또아
So, yes, empty of not arising in dependence upon other factors, right? That is that empty of true existence.
예라 마테비 또아
Empty of not arising connected with something else.
리송아 어다 대지 강가 된다 지바손도 돈 두마니 있잖아
So these are all kind of different words pointing at the same thing in terms of thinking about emptiness.
리송아 마도 로지지 요 말에 자치들레기 요 마도 요 말에 디노요세 요 말에 스테야 보고 가레스
라?
치카리나요 로지지 요 말에 로지지 매바도 돈이레세 요 마도
Yeah.
치코로티 요 말에 디노요세 뭐
So it's really important to understand where we say that there is no phenomena that exists inherently. It's that it doesn't exist inherently, right, independent of other factors. But we are not saying that it does not exist at all. That's an important distinction.
리송아 어다 네스 던디지 이자 롱게 데네 니카게 데시 타투게 데시 어다 가리나요 버게 예를 띠데야 이자 하코서와 서는 예세아 자치모레 네바시 요 말에
And dependent arising is so useful also because, for example, if we think about our temporary happiness, if we think about our ultimate happiness, we can see that there is no happiness that arises, right, independently. Every single happiness that we experience, it arises in dependence upon others. So that is also a very useful dependent arising to understand.
어다 대우 가디기나 소아지 그요 디로 바치 모소 용요 아레스
And so we really always need to have a feeling for that particular teaching because it is a great assist in our practice.
어다 티체 텔타 알레디 디스트린 치마레
So at least in that way, we covered a little bit of in praise of dependent arising.
야 티체 디야기 겨야 본거 가보면 되는 거 좋아질래로
So thank you very much. We will pause here and with a happy mind dedicate the merits. And then if those of you who may need to get on with your day, please do. But we will also have time for questions afterwards if you're interested.
장주 semju rinpoche maje banam chejur ji jewan yamba meba yang gone gondu bewar sho tongni tawa rinpoche maje banam chejur ji jewan yamba meba yang Gone gondu bewar shu jambe pao jedar kemba tong kundu zambo deyon dejende deda kungi jesu dalo che gewa dida tongje radungo Dusun shebe gyawa dongje ge ngawa gangla chodo ngabade dagi gewe tsawa dekun kyang zambo cheje radu ngawar ge
알아서 교와서 빈디파텔라 때네다 모두 던도 도와리 주게 센지 슬리나야 다 리지강에 센지 강에라서 가리나야 다 보게 쉬위전도
Through the merits, through the power of the merits that all of us have accumulated together, may every single physical suffering, every single mental suffering, suffering of mental illness and so forth, for every last sentient being, be completely cleared away.
니가이나요 리데와 다 세기와 근데 뒤문에 다 야보진 좋다야지 가까
May all sentient beings enjoy, even on the temporary level, good health, and happy minds, and based upon that, achieve a lasting happiness. So we'll pause there. Are there any questions? People, you can ask a question about anything to do with the class. You can ask, if you'd like to ask Geshe a little bit about the upcoming events, anything you would like to ask about.
Lama kashi in ta koi no da senje kanyala tan ta se teze lumba na bo shin de yaras ta nganzo ta ya bo ju so no to ni ki wo so ne.
So one thing that Geshe wanted to share is that a lot of lamas, when they talk about the sufferings of samsara and the consequences of negative karma and so forth, they do this with kind of a very dark or heavy face. But Geshe-la's approach is always to try to cover those, but to more focus on the positive aspects of the path, like with kind of a joyful mind.
Ya no ya kare ya kuzacho ina ha kozarawa o da ya sonji getni pre nganzo kala la tenela ha kozarawa kibo jojo china no ya ne tsi yare sungtwas.
His Holiness the Dalai Lama has said that it is actually the purpose of the Buddha's advice for us to be able to abide happily, to go from happiness to happiness, right? It's a positive.
Tate jaja jaden borendu was so nyoda yodu yar nyoda momo yare ko ya ko nyoda momo duas to tate ju to sono to ya ka chen bore so mge senche te de ya to chonji sembe te resultani hala ne momo yare.
So of course there are many problems, there are many difficulties within samsara, and it is important to contemplate those, right, in the appropriate time. But actually, what we want to do is to cultivate the Bodhisattva attitude, the Bodhisattva path, so that we can go from happiness to happiness while benefiting others.
Semshene deva ina seju chani semshene deva ina karina yete kanga da thog mare sungduas. Because
if we in our practice abide in a state of discouragement, it is said that if one abides in a state of discouragement, the positive mental qualities cannot be brought forth.
And
those three types of laziness, including the laziness of discouragement, have been hindering us for countless lifetimes, right up until the present. So we want to go with an attitude of happy confidence as we continue in our practice, right? And that being said, are there any questions?
I don't see any questions, but I can share that I've as part of the renovations of the Blue Shrine there, I was able to share a perspective yesterday with Geshe about being discouraged with my own delusions. So I really appreciate the the comments.
Di Dave di lebdi roa korongi nyomong korla semjuk chaya chig dua de again kalula tene pendochu so antu Geshe. Yeah. So if being discouraged was a beneficial thing from the point of view of practice, absolutely be discouraged. But we know, right, from our own experience that being discouraged is not helpful to us, right? So we don't want to fall into that too much. Just kidding. I heard someone chime in. Go ahead.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
You can.
I'm not sure that it's an appropriate question. It seems a bit silly to me. But I was wondering, I have a head cold right now, and how do you maintain mindfulness when you feel like there's a virus inside you that is making you suffer?
nganso ko kandes la gore nganso lepa gi champa chik dua disena go naung la gi champa kale ka wo chik ro dene dus chene nganso di natsa pet debo mepe kaplola dene nganso jempa mutune kandes nyagosa
간데시
jempa so perna jampa dang natsa shuk champo kaplola nganso jempa kandes nyagores karinsena nape kaplola tes kale ka wo re duasa
네 나비갈 쇼바 간데시 냐가세 그래
champa gi natsa chik dua roa lo jaya gi natsa
Yeah.
di yope kapla nganso jempa kandes nyargores karinsana subo debum duas
네 템바냐에도 릴라버레 다 디디갈 연다 고자 그런데서 갈래 가버was
so Geshe says that when you're sick he thinks maintaining mindfulness jempa le laboreves
템바 때즈 릴라버 요아레스 다 소기나
is not the most difficult thing compared to other meditations you might do when you're not feeling so great.
네 템바 때모서야도 미타 뭐야 릴라버 먹어도was 빼나 간냐서 가리나 해서 강해지거나 강해된 거 시바 시워 가서 잡아이나 코 템바 연다 만디나 강해질래서나
Yeah.
내일 강해도
Yes.
대 프시워 것이바이나요
Yes.
템바 때다 거 야보대요
In fact, mindfulness, so we should be clear, right? The teachings in Tibetan Buddhism on mindfulness differ from a lot of the stuff that's in the market these days. So it's important to say that. But mindfulness is an awareness of what's happening. So what Geshe is saying is that when you're sick, if you have an awareness of, I am experiencing this cold, and you're able to hold that awareness without thinking of a lot of other things, that's a type of mindfulness, actually.
나도 자투와 옛날에 공바자바 옛날에 너지 공바자가 거 같은 거 작은데 와서 어때 대로 뭐시 봐서야 되는데 와서 템바 때모서야
And so the mindfulness is that recognition of the activity we're doing. I am drinking tea right now. I am walking right now. And being able to maintain that recollection and that awareness of the activity that we're actually engaged in without going into other directions.
매 소화전도 라보 그거요 말아 와서 다 좀바 고민이지 거서나 다될 나자요나 되들라고요 말했어
So in a way, just being mindfulness of the experience that we're engaged in that moment, even when we're sick, might not be so difficult. But when we have a head cold or another kind of illness like that, yes, trying to meditate on compassion, trying to meditate on love, develop those feelings, that might be difficult.
다 걸어 소화 가르시나 더할 때는 야수지 되레스 저는 소화 때에서 그 가디노로 자네고 메대와 되고 말아 와서 좋은소를 건져와도 알았어
So for example, when you're experiencing a cold, you could think like you could do a placement of mindfulness on feelings. What are the feelings that I am experiencing? What are those feelings like? What is their nature? And are they permanent? I'm not coughing all the time. I'm not congested all the time. Therefore, these feelings are not lasting. They are impermanent. You could think of something like that.
다 야로서는 또다 할레비 되고 만드는 데서 갈래 가와라 마도 처음부터 자야 뭐요 바체 어느 할레비 강에 만드나 아니 다 던지게 가서 로자가 나사치 미다게 요아래 건저그 주사는 사람 만드와 데데 말에서
So of course, depending on how sick we are, we might not have the energy for it, but we could also say like, it is through this coughing or through this head congestion that I am labeling this experience as a cold. But that cold is something that is merely labeled. It doesn't have any independent existence. It doesn't have any pinpointable existence at all. You could also think like that.
다 대강에 처머랭 서라서는 또게 하면 되와 건저그 주사는 만두와
And so in that way, we think, this cold, I don't need to grasp too much to this difficulty that it is causing because there is no pinpointable essence to the cold at all.
다저 야슈 채워 보게로 자비가 소선저그 주사 여비 노아 잡고 지된된 뒤와 대강서 강가를 쓰고요
And also, we see when we're really sick, like, for example, if you're coughing very violently from a cold, our experience of that cold is something that is inherently existent, independent, unchanging. We have a very strong experience of that misperception. So that can also be something that we could examine.
년로 사기 제도체 뭐 단다 제도체 뭐 지라 수발라티는 고슈인도 마도 건저그 주사는 때문에
We know, though, that cold that we're experiencing, it's coming from many causes and conditions coming together, like the weakness in the body, as well as whatever the pathogen is that's causing it. All of these things coming together, these lead to this experience of what we label as a cold. But if we were to try to find a pinpointable, inherently existent cold, we would not be able to find anything at all.
다 되게 템바템보서 맞아 할레비 내서 디사버질로 요아래
So actually, in this way, if we do the mindfulness on that experience, just of something like a cold, it can actually help us to comprehend even deeper truths, deeper things.
This way.
So depending on where we apply our mindfulness in that experience, it could help an understanding to unfold. So I hope that at least answered your question partly, Emily. I believe it was Emily who asked that. But when we're kind of unpacking this experience, right, using our mindfulness to unpack the experience like that, when there's other thoughts that are coming, the practice of mindfulness is to try not to let them intrude, right? So maybe don't be too aggressive about pushing them out, but just thinking whatever thought apart from my object of focus that arises let it arise, but I will not grasp at that thought. So I hope that answered Emily's question. I don't know if we still have her, but hopefully it did. And I see that there's another hand. So
yes.
Carol, do you want to go ahead?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yep.
Okay. I have several questions. Okay. So when we're talking about giving, you were talking about looking after ourselves, right, while we're practicing. So it's a commitment of a bodhisattva to look after ourselves, that our happiness and other people's happiness goes together, yeah?
Yes.
So I want to check that in the perfection of giving, we don't give our body until we've realized emptiness. In other words, until we have no harm coming from the giving. Is that correct?
Gotcha. Nganso di perna jimpe ginyamlen kola keche shedu ruwa. Dene di nganso yen kiwa teagi chedire. Ngarong so yang kiwa chik gogi duas. Dene yengi kiwa da nganso kiwa jawa chik yores duas. Jawa mepa mares. Dende yimpa yindu nganso jimpe parchen kola keche shedu. Nganso lupo di pul gogi duas. Lupo di pulna Ra dene nganso kange mepe kapala pugo gires mato pentot menduas. Dene disena nganso tongni mato ngela ra lu pul tugio mares karin sena tongni gitopa di mena puya pentot mendus direbesa.
Mara. Ta tena na tsubachi was. Che tobol li piate.
Yeah.
Hakosare.
Yeah.
Ta li du tri pa piate. Tun tumani tun a che tobo sosol kange meba.
So there's a nuance here, but yes, like in the essence of like completely offering one's body and one's life in that highest kind of way, like we see in the stories, we have to be able to offer that without any personal difficulty, without any suffering. And logically, that would require a realization of emptiness. So yes. Tony Tobejela. So the rule, there's actually kind of a rule that one cannot completely offer one's body until there is a realization of emptiness. However, there are exceptions of beings that had a very high level of realization, maybe not necessarily that final understanding of emptiness, but another high realization, and they still offered their bodies. So for us as beginners, though, let's be clear, we don't have the capacity, nor is it necessarily advisable for us to offer our bodies. So what do we do then? Yes. So, but practitioners can still offer their bodies to a degree. So Geshe was saying that in India, for the Indian authorities, it's well known that if somebody needs a kidney or part of a liver or something like that, the place you want to go and ask is the monastery, right? The Indian authorities know that. They will come to the monastery to ask. And in fact, Geshe said many monks did offer a kidney, for example, when it was requested. So because they knew that, right, that some of the monks will try to practice in that way, when you're looking for a kidney, you come to the monastery as a place to ask. And similar also, a lot of people are donating blood. So the people that are collecting the blood donations and so forth, they will come to the monastery. And this is a type of giving of one's body. So the monastics, in this case, right, they're not giving their entire body, knowing that maybe they're not at that level, but they are giving part of their body as a very, very powerful practice of giving in that context. But we could say, if you wanted sort of an overarching rule, we could say that until one is able to give the body without difficulty, we could say it like this, without difficulty, one must not engage in that type of generosity. We could say it like that.
So it's a kind of healthy, a healthy giving, not a sacrifice. Yeah.
Yeah. So jimpa kibo chene te tugidus halepe kale kabo durujaya gine soyoma.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Then you mentioned in the I think it's one of the well, doesn't matter where. Are you saying that everyone who is giving to others, so you're talking about emanations as doctors, as people helping other people. Is this a kind of sutra way of looking at everything positive as being emanations of Buddhas?
Nganso jimpe parchin korla nganso ruat perna sange gizultru konso mempa so tugiris menshap so tugiris konso chatsangwa so tugire duas di doluk ginetso tes dapo chikres karin san ngak nangla nganso chatsangwa sange dang sange gi kukor leka che dapo chigiris di dang dapo rebesa.
Yeah, ndabores ya dolule tene mo yares.
Yes, like you could say that, and in fact, according to Sutra, there are many ways to see those actions, right, as beneficial, as pure of all beings. Yes, so there's many such examples. Yeah. Norbu. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So, and just to go back, Geshe wanted to share one more scriptural reference to your previous question, Carol, which is that when an Arya Bodhisattva, right? In other words, a Bodhisattva who's realized emptiness, when an Arya Bodhisattva has somebody come to them and demand their body or demand the part of their body, the feeling that they have is a feeling of joy greater than finding a wish-granting gem, right? So there's no question of them having difficulty with that. Right. Yeah, and once you are in that Arya level of realization, then giving your body, right, is not such a big thing. Yeah. Huh? So there's many stories also in the scripture of like various lamas, various highly realized beings that somebody goes up to them and asks for their body, right? And all of like the attendants and the students are freaking out and like, please don't do that, please don't do that. And the person still gives it, right? Because it was requested, because of that feeling of joy. So you find that in a lot of the stories of the holy beings. So in that case, right, the practitioner has the discernment to know, yes, like them abiding there is beneficial to the students and the attendants and whatever, but in that particular case, it's more beneficial to do that kind of generosity. So that's what they decide to do. Yes. And the highest practice of generosity, the highest practice of giving, just to be clear, is the giving without thought of return. The giving without the thought of achieving any advantage in return. However, for us, because we might, let's assume that we might be in samsara for a while, which means that we have to go from lifetime to lifetime, and we want to make sure that we have the things we need. From a worldly point of view, the practice of giving is our best insurance to make sure we have enough that we need in the future.
Yeah.
So it's clever, happy giving, yes?
Yeah, Kibochene partigure duasa. Yes,
Thank
yes.
you.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
very
You're
much.
welcome.
Thank you.
Dave,
Yep. Yeah, we
did
have
I
a
see
question
hand
from
up there?
Facebook.
Yes, yes.
So Ashley is asking whether she misunderstood. You had mentioned something along the lines of we meditate for the well-being of others, including animals, because they cannot. Why can't animals? Sometimes animals appear to be in a meditative state.
Did we say we meditate for animals because they cannot? Did I say that?
Yeah, we meditate for the well-being of others, including animals, because they cannot. Yeah, something like being an example, you know? I remember.
No. Now I know. No, this wasn't the context. The context was we need to be happy and to take care of our physical and mental health, but so we need to do that. But if that's all we're worried about, if we're only worried about nice things to eat, nice things to drink, and so forth, our behavior is not different from that of animals. It wasn't about animals meditating.
Okay.
So, but I can still ask Geshe if animals can meditate if you want.
I think it was earlier. It was really the very beginning, talking about. Yeah, maybe to be an example. How we are an example to others, and this allows others to become inspired to see there's something different. And maybe animals are mentioned there. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Anyways, let's just ask about the question generally. Nganzo di dundo seria dirwa konso gomjab to girebes. Karin sana samsam dudo tona den konso gomjab ya dang dabo duasa.
Yeah, pewaji in the
So Geshe's answer to that is that there's a saying in Tibet that when the cat does a long purr, like that sound, that they're reciting the 21 praises of Tathagata. Like they joke, they say, oh, the cat's reciting the 21 praises to Tathagata. Yeah. So we could say generally it's probably not common, but if an animal has a strong imprint from a previous life, we can't say it's impossible that they meditate. Geshe would answer like that. But for example, like also in terms of meditation, in terms of this Tibetan word gom, familiarity, and also focus, they can do that for sort of negative things, maybe like a cat trying to find a mouse. They can concentrate pretty single pointedly to do that. Yeah. They will be perfectly focused on that mouse and knowing like where it is and when it's going to come out, and they can focus on that single pointedly, right? So from just the perspective of pure familiarity, yes. Right. And we can't really say that that's not meditation because many of the great lamas have given the advice that if you want to know what it's like to meditate on love and compassion, just think of how you meditate upon anger and attachment. So just take that complete immersion in the experience of anger and attachment and apply that in meditation to love and compassion, right? And it's easy to meditate, right, on those, let us say, more unwholesome things. It's easy to focus on those single-pointedly. Why? Because of our habituation to those things. But definitely, you know, as special examples, there are beings who are animals this lifetime who, due to previous strong imprints of love, compassion, and so forth, that yes, they may be contemplating or meditating on those things. Yes. And just remembering a teaching of the Buddha of this, in one of the sutras, someone asked the Buddha, in what realm is it possible, or in what form is it possible to bring forth bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment? And the Buddha said, any type of the 6 beings within samsara, it is possible for them to bring forth bodhicitta. So in that sense, yes.
손지 걸어 던롤리 쪽 갈래 가윙에 속내라. 야 니지 슈다 보시네라 다야.
So remember, it is said that the Buddha brought forth that first realization of bodhicitta in a realm even more difficult than the animal realm, in the hell realm, and seeing the suffering there, he brought forth an unbearable compassion, which unfolded his bodhicitta. So yes.
야 시부터 가시게서는 생지 찔을 니지 슈다 보시네래. 가시게 될라 때는 생지 강가를 니지 슈다 보시와레스. And
so some people say that when the Buddha, before he became enlightened, right, first brought forth that bodhicitta in that hell realm, some people say it was on the basis of seeing just kind of like one sentient being suffering really terribly in that situation, and some say it was from the combination of all the suffering of all of the beings in that realm moving his mind. So we can tell that story perhaps at length later. Are there any other questions? I can only see a few of the tiles at once, so if you have a final question, please just chime in.
Okay, can I don't want to hog the space, but I am hogging space. Is that okay?
Well, no, like nobody else. I mean, you gave. No, there was a silence, so anyone who wanted
Okay, right.
So go ahead.
I have a question about the it's not specifically about money, it's about merit with the teachings that are coming, right?
Yes.
There's lots of different things to donate to.
Yes.
So is it better to do one thing with a lot more, or to
Yes.
spread out all your donations to all the different things? I'm quite confused by the whole thing. So I don't know if Yeshe Sonam would like, if it's appropriate, to ask about comment on that.
I will ask him, but oh my gosh, that's a political question if I ever heard one.
Well, I just don't know. I don't know. I'm faced with this, and it looks wonderful. And
No, I know it is. I think it is something that a lot of people struggle with. Yes, no, I'll ask it, but you may not get a completely linear answer. Just
that's perfect though. But I don't know. It's interesting because of what's coming up and the connections we make.
Yeah.
In different ways with these things, right? That's all.
Perna nganso di jimba gi nyamlen kola samlo tana dene kyopo nganso di lama gi gokap chigyore de la roa dene ine chirtang roa dinsang nganso di nangshu gi neso drama natsok yores roa dene chik so tets mambo tena di apo chegi chedu yagadus neso drama natsok tets te yagadus karin sena nganso chudrel dang soya kola samlo tango gire dua dene jimpa nang tang yaksho kandes chikres. So we can't say if one is better than the other, but what we can say is look at the object, in other words, the cause, in this case, that you are making the offering to, and evaluate that. Because actually the most important thing might not necessarily be which one we choose to give to. The most important thing is we don't want to regret that action of giving later. So we have to check the object that we're giving to very carefully. But really, he can't advise you specifically on that because it depends on each person, right? What can we give happily to? Is it easier to do with one, or do we want to give to a few? Which do we think would be more beneficial? That has to be your process. Yeah. So we really have to look from all of that, from kind of like from a dependent arising way, right? Which kind of direction we want to put our focus or energy in. But he can't tell you who to give to, just to be clear. Yeah. Yes, that's a question you have to ask yourself, right? Like, what do you think would be most beneficial?
Yeah, the problem with the dependent arising is that the funds are needed for all of it, all the different sections. So.
Yes, there are many needs. So then he would say the advice is give to who you can give, with the best certainty that you won't be regretting it later. That would be his advice.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. I think I see another hand. I think it might be Deki Lee. Go ahead, Deki Lee. Is Deki Lee talking? I think I see. Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
Can you hear me
I
now?
can hear- Yes. Yep.
Okay. My understanding, and I may be wrong, is that when the Dalai Lama has had obstructed astrological, or my understanding is that lamas like Lama Yeshe and other high lamas transferred their life force to him in a year that was particularly bad for his survival. Is that an example of offering your body?
Great. Yes. Okay. Got it. Let me ask this. Jawa Rinpoche nguma kandes lagare kutse ringpo gi barshe zila tene kariyana kutse ringpo barshe shuk champo chi lebswa di kaplo la ya dene lama tsa champo mambo chi lama yeshe dang lama dramandra chi korong so gi mitse lakma korong la chi par shaksa re dua dene dalo lama mambo chi gomba zo so nga chana di soya chik yore bes rwa soso gi mitse lakma di jenda puya chik yores di chik che ane nipa di dus chene pulna yang dene lugi jimpa chagire besa.
야 소소 세계 디네 때리 비하게 돼 주나 다시 말리 지만 이도 이러와스 쳐지 말에 제발에 다 간가러와.
So yes, if this offering of like that extra life force is made with kind of a deep abiding motivation and joyfully, then that offering does become an offering of the body.
ngama lama za chimbochi ko duas ane za chimbote sin maji ko rdaji neba shibikala rdal menda jabikala lama te ke shon duas
Yeah.
lama te ke shobikala koro ya gitu kanga ge mo shon duas hakoso konzo ichimene
Loso.
ichishuma songas
Yeah.
yima lami ge te songas
Ale.
koro pusipol.
So Geshe, just thinking of another story of this, there was one Lama who was talking about the disadvantages of killing and hunting, and somehow his students found it funny when people were like harming the animals and so forth, like they weren't really believing in the teaching. So to get them to kind of believe in the teaching, he lifted up his robe and it showed like the puncture wounds from the arrow or whatever they were using to hurt the animal.
다들이 야 미다 코로를 네바시 생질 네바시 야 코로를 렘빌로 주요.
So that's another example of him taking the harm that would have been put to those sentient beings, or taking the obstacles that would have been put to those sentient beings and taking it on himself.
라마 카시 군바 주키 우슈스 드니치네. 라마 카시 오페 군바 마존 로마르지 거모션이라. 하고선 때에서 뭐 건저 이심 주마송아스.
게모션에서나 그래.
그 센젤 멘다 주비가 라메케 쇼아라와.
Yeah. 하고선.
lemke shobikal konza gimo shogro thong yo marwa
레디라 바인데네.
sigi was te sim lama kashi te sim ta dam da ya
야보 코모선데네.
si was te to kashi ga kange chile thoya tni wu
Yes.
was
So the high level beings, the high level masters, they can take on those obstacles that others may be facing. And sorry, Geshe was just reiterating that, like when he was warning against harming the beings, the students weren't really taking him seriously. So he kind of like showed them, right, where those arrows had kind of punctured in his own body. So at a high level, yes, like one can take on those obstacles or give that power. So of course, in this particular case that Deki Lee mentioned, not only is that an offering of the body and a practice of generosity, right, but due to like the power of the object, it's a very powerful kind of practice. 아, 네, 마게.
마게.
러서.
하고서라.
제.
오, 당가 마셔와지만도니라. 누완도는 냐침보치 셔와는 곤조 칼라사토야지.
Geshe was thinking of the other story. I think it's called the story of the Rohingya. It's almost like the word Rohingya, but Rohita, something like this. Yeah, it's similar to that group of people who live in Burma, but it's Rohita fish, I think. The Buddha saw that there was a famine, and he couldn't do anything to stop the famine from happening. So he prayed to be reborn as a very kind of large fish, which was able to stop the famine. So that's another example of giving one's body.
오다 저거 자오레테네 다 코로를 벽에 강에 둥하게 내서 매사 손아트는 온저라시로 만두았어.
But because he had defeated the causes of experiencing suffering, he was able to kind of give up his life and be reborn as that fish without any difficulty.
Just in addition to that, with the example of lifting up his shirt and showing the spear wound, would that be a successful Tonglen?
Dus chene ngoma medaya di marchik sona de di Tonglen ngene drupsongi ne sorebe.
야야 다땡이네 와스 이네 레토하고 니 받쳐서 봐.
That is actually in the Tonglen, that the part of taking on that suffering. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
야마도 다 모치야 당가서 미바존이 소소 다 벤비에 배도도 요아르데 팅링이스 레토하고 니 봐요 말와스.
Just to be clear, for most of us when we practice Tonglen, right, we do this on the level of visualization, and this is something that can really benefit our mind, but we don't yet have the level of realization where we'll be actually taking on like a spear wound or something like that.
You know, when you were talking, I'm sorry, I have a question. You were talking about attachments. It's Margaret.
Yeah. Hi there.
Hi. Can't the Buddhas help you to minimize? Like, that's why we pray and stuff. Like you're saying, we have to look at our afflictions and look at the root cause of the attachments. But sometimes I see my root where it's coming from, but I don't have the capacity to detach it, like you're saying, with the oil in the cloth.
Yes.
I mean, if it's stained, it's going to be hard for me to get it out. So can't the Buddhas help me with that?
Nganso duchak se di mepa soyala nganso monam jaya dang din so sange nganso ropa che tugi menduas perna nganso monam jab mambo jamna dene duchak di mepa soro ches konso ropa che tugi mendus karin sena samsam nganso duchak nyongdu nganso nom di rela yores nom di yus ine nganso duchak di pangya gi nupa yomares roa nganso kazu tu che tugi yomares dene sange ropa che na degi duas dene monam jaya la tene konso duchak mepa so tugi rebesa.
멜로 자야라 때는데 저 메와서 더 말와스 다이나요 다 디고 보여 줄 때는 거예요 아래 쪼쪼데 아니 로이 이네도 코로스가 레 돈비깔은 요래지야
야
르마니 발은 요래자 르마지도 순데 대든 로그요
test taring bodea down. Yeah. So we can't pray away attachment in the sense of like we can't just ask the Buddha to take away our attachment and it's going to go away. That's not how it works. We can pray to the Buddha for assistance, right, to be able to unfold our practice, and they can give us blessings to help us unfold our practice. But in terms of actually getting rid of the attachment, we have to cultivate the instructions. So we can think of the instructions of Vasubandhu, for example, talking about at first you try to keep a little bit of distance from the person that you're keeping the attachment or the anger from. We want to put in those practical steps, of which there are many.
하고서 다가 체주지 되라 가 체주 릴라워드 가 체주지 되라 당긴 아주 깨져 먹으셔서 동반이 깨져 먹으셔서 와서 동반인 걸 좋아서 너 하는데 저 거라 알레 주도 버시라 마시는 요하나 하고서라 동반이를 좋아서 내서는 내 저를 너무 매버시고 키 네트들이 동용을 하랬어.
But if you're hoping for like a kind of supernatural unfolding where the attachment is getting cleared away, Geshe is proposing that think about emptiness. Because it is said that as we develop our understanding of emptiness and as we have a higher and higher realization of emptiness, eventually we come to a point where the power of attachment to arise is just completely eradicated. So if you want like sort of like a good sort of profitability for your effort, then emptiness is the way to go. But we can't pray away attachment. We can't hope to get rid of an affliction just by praying to the Buddha to get rid of it. It doesn't work that way.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
어야 돼서 사실은
So thank you very much, everybody. It was fun, and I see we're also a little bit over time, so let us end here, and we will see you next Sunday, or if you're of a mind to, we will see you Tuesday morning for Chudro Duchen, for the precepts and the Bodhisattva vows. Take care,
야
everybody.
되게 야
Thank you, Geshe La, Venerable Kendra. So nice to see you again.
Thanks so much, everybody. Thanks, Kimberly. Thank you,
Good
everybody.
day.
Wonderful to see everyone.
어야 다시 내려가까.
Yashe.
Thank you.